Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and as we all know, one of the more surefire ways for a games developer to find themselves being inducted into the not-so-hallowed halls of the dirty devs is for censorship, plain and simple. Normally, this tends to exhibit itself within the silencing of critique in one form or another, but what about if a developer chooses to censor their own game? And normally, that would not be cause for alarm. Granted, it would be a disappointing thing to see, but it would have to be a fairly severe act for including into the dirty devs. Now, what if I tell you that the developers have chosen to censor their own game that is not an MMO, that is not a mainly online-based game? And now we also factor in that the game was released a full decade ago, all the way back in 2013. And in addition to that, the developers have also, as a part of this censorship, which is based on what appears to be ideological reasons, have also opted to remove art from the artbook that people had also purchased through Steam over the course of that same previous decade. And that is precisely what we have with Skullgirls, a game released in 2013 and currently developed by Hidden Variable Studios, formerly developed by Lab Zero Games and published by Autumn Games. Skullgirls is, as I said, a video game that was released in 2013 by Lab Zero Games. It is a very fan-servicey fighting game that appears to be a fairly decent hit. Back in June of 2020, two Lab Zero Games employees accused Mike Zaimont, a lead designer for Skullgirls, of inappropriate behavior. This eventually led to several members of the Skullgirls community issuing a statement that Mike Zaimont should receive an indefinite ban from all commentary positions at Skullgirls events, along with a 2-year ban from offline and online competitions. Barely 2 months later, it was reported that the board of Lab Zero partnered with the rest of Lab Zero's employees and asked Mike Z to step away from the company as his role of sole owner. Zaimont did enter negotiations with them over this, but he made what was stated as being unrealistically high and potentially illegal demands. The board rejected those demands, which saw Mike Z disband the board and assume complete control of Lab Zero Games. This action then saw several high-profile staff members leave Lab Zero. Less than 2 weeks later, Mike Z fired the entirety of the studio's remaining staff after those higher-profile staff members had left. This was the end of Lab Zero Games, and the Skullgirls publisher Autumn Games, along with the Skullgirls mobile developers Hidden Variable Studios, promised to keep the game alive. Then, very shortly after that, within a matter of weeks, a group of 16 former Lab Zero employees banded together and created the game studio Future Club, which was purported as being a worker-owned co-op. And that seemed to be that. However, it was announced in March of 2021 that Hidden Variable would be working alongside Future Club to design new content for Skullgirls that included a brand new season and multiple DLC characters and stages. And this is what brought about the game being rebranded as Skullgirls Second Encore. And for their part, fans were excited to see more story content to come for this now nearly 10-year-old game, along with new characters and new art. But unfortunately for those that have purchased Skullgirl, that's not all they were due to get with this new Second Encore. On Monday, June 26th of this year, fans of Skullgirls were greeted with this message stating that several adjustments had been made to the game, as well as the digital art compendium on all platforms, PC, console, and mobile. And those changes were to censor some of the more fan service elements of several characters, including palettes, in-game art, the combo counterphrase, which actually, let's pause on that for a moment. Now, as this is a fan service style game, one would expect the developers to throw in some fan service jokes along with it, or at least have some fun with the idea. One of those moments was when a person performed an 18-hit combo. That combo was titled as Barely Legal, an obvious reference to a person's age. That veiled joke has been changed to simply Spiffy. Essentially, what this list shows is that the developers have removed or replaced voice lines, animations, the counterphrase that I just mentioned, and art from the game, which this quote-unquote update is not an update at all. It is a subtraction and replacement. A subtraction and replacement for content that has already been present for a decade and that people have paid for and happily enjoyed up until now. To this, the developers also released a statement in an attempt to explain their thought process behind these changes, which includes your usual ideological, racially motivated mindset and sexualization these developers have suddenly deemed after this entire decade to now be considered to be problematic. Now, in it, they said, "We of course realize that some members of the Skullgirls community may disagree with these changes either in terms of how we chose to address them or whether they were in fact issues that warranted addressing in the first place. Please know that all these choices have been made following careful consideration and lengthy discussion amongst all members of the current development team. Beyond this post, we do not intend to discuss the particulars of these changes further." And that last bit is what stuck with me the most out of all of the rest of their statement. We do not intend to discuss the particulars of these changes further, which to my mind very much reads as a very dictatorial statement that you just have to accept these changes because we will not encourage, engage with, or even brook any dissension with what we, the developers, have decided upon. It just struck me as being highly imperious in nature and a very clear line in the sand that would anger the vast majority of any player base. Especially considering these changes were sprung on people without warning and is a fundamental change to the game that some of them paid for 10 years ago. It's not making an addition to the base game like a new story mode would or new characters that will help expand upon the base game. No, it is fundamentally changing the base game in a way that no one had asked for. And the backlash from the game's fans has been as expected. Numerous posts on the Steam discussion threads, which have seen a great many people blocked, some for legitimate reasons, others for not. And due to the developers refusing to entertain even the thought of discussing this with those that have already purchased their game, those players took to the Steam review system, which saw a massive influx of negative reviews due to these changes, and a significant uptick in positive reviews attempting to combat the flood. But the negative reviews are currently outweighing the positive within the last 30 days by nearly 80%. This is, at the end of the day, a huge problem, and those players have every right to be angry over what the Skullgirls developers have done. The problem here is that Hidden Variable Studios does have a legal right to do this. Because one thing that a lot of people forget about when purchasing digital copies of games like most of us PC gamers do on Steam is that we're not purchasing a game when we buy it on Steam. We are purchasing a license to access the game, which fundamentally shifts the mentality of developers such as these. And this is a huge problem with how these systems work and how PC gaming culture has become so corrupted over the years. Being blinded by convenience and a general lack of awareness and/or caring unless and until it affects us negatively in some way or another. Valve, in their quest for market dominance, which they accomplished, began slowly shifting PC gaming to be completely independent of physical copies all the way back in September of 2003. Back then, Valve offered up their Steam platform for game developers along with their own first-party titles such as the original Half-Life as a means to both sell their games and an effective means of keeping those games updated post-launch with bug fixes and expansions. Eventually, Valve would require any developer who sold physical copies while also making use of Steam to ship the physical disc with a Steam key built in, along with Steam installers and a recovery key stickered to the inside of the box. Valve then later promoted the cost-benefit savings to game developers to forego shipping physical copies at all once Steam had become prevalent enough within the PC gaming world, which is a real shame. If Skullgirls had sold physical copies of the game, or if physical copies were even still a thing in the PC gaming world, those players could simply choose not to update the game. But that isn't possible anymore. After all, like I said, we don't buy the games we play anymore, we purchase a license to merely access them. And while the developers are likely extremely aware of this, it doesn't make what they have done here any less distasteful. You should not be able to get away with changing the single-player elements of a game 10 years after the fact in order to simply remove, alter, and replace content that your ideology now finds distasteful. It is despicable, it is disgusting, and it is absolutely abhorrent to force those changes on people that have, in their minds, even if that's not technically true, owned the game for 10 goddamn years now. This is no longer the game that they purchased, and you are providing them with zero recourse or option. Either suck it up or go away. That is what you were telling your players, Hidden Variable Studios, that you neither need nor require their support or their business any longer. And I for one hope they choose to walk away from you in any future games or content you produce after this. Welcome to the Dirty Devs Hidden Variable and Autumn Games too. I hope you enjoy your stay. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. I'll see you next time.